C.J. Box introduced us to the Wyoming game warden Joe Pickett in 2001 with his debut novel, Open Season. Right away, readers were drawn to Pickett, the Everyman Hero caught in ever more dangerous situations with limited resources and often no backup. Here was a hero they could all identify with. No superhuman strength or endurance, no specialized government training, no particular expertise with weapons. Just an honest man doing the best he could under difficult circumstances. Box has created a modern-day Gary Cooper, who would draw a vast and dedicated fan base that would follow Joe Pickett through 19 more novels, up to his latest scorching thriller, Long Range. Along the way, Box created an additional series featuring private investigator Cassie Duell, which will soon be brought to television by renowned producer David E. Kelley, as well as 3 standalone novels. One of these, Blue Heaven, won the Edgar Award for Best Novel in 2009. After 7 million copies sold and a case full of awards, C.J. Box, like his protagonist Joe Pickett, continues to go about his work doggedly and with unyielding integrity. The latest result, Long Range, is a novel filled with characters so raw and genuine and perils so authentic, your palms will sweat on the pages. With each passing chapter, you will dread what lies ahead for Joe and his family and friends. That, as always, Box delivers a thrilling and satisfying conclusion. Luckily for us, there is no conclusion in sight for the brilliant and prolific C.J. Box.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we want to toast to our guest today, Mr. C.J. Box. Welcome to our show. Good to have you on here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I like the whole show.
Oh,
welcome,
good.
Welcome.
Well, hopefully this won't live up to the past ones that you've watched so far. So Joe Pickett, he's faced off with quite a variety of antagonists, from environmental terrorists to cartel hit teams from south of the border to animal mutilators and everything in between. When you're constructing your narrative, do you start with the villain? And without giving spoilers, is that kind of how it drove you to start off with Long Range?
No, my methodology has actually stayed the same since the very first book, and I don't think it's necessarily the right way or something I'd recommend, but it works for me. And what I always start with is 1 or 2 issues, contemporary issues. It's kind of way it's worked out over the years. It's usually one of the, I hate the word issues, but topics. It's usually something that's in the news in this region that people are talking about. And then I often introduce, more global or national kind of problems or issues or things that I'm interested in. And I research the heck out of them. And before I ever know what's going to happen or the plot or the bad guy. And once I've researched it, things kind of strangely start to fall into place. Where does Joe Pickett fit into this? And then the way I always look at it is, once I have these topics researched enough that I'm comfortable with writing about them, and that includes sometimes putting on my old reporter's hat and going out and talking to people and interviewing them about their professions or about their passions. And there's a lot of environmental stuff in these, so it's very passionate.
Right.
I always look at it as, how can I pull a reader through these issues in a page-turning way? So once I've sort of built the foundation, then I start to introduce the characters. And sometimes I go off on different directions, but that's my process always, and has been not only for the now 20 Joe Pickett books and 6 standalones. Is I always start with a big topic, a big theme, and then go from there.
Well, your latest book, Long Range, right here, the first chapter, it's striking, it's inventive. It takes readers on a visual ride with a projectile cutting through the air over the landscape. It's a beautifully written chapter. And as writers, we're always in search of that perfect opening chapter that pulls the reader in. So, but my question is, was this always the first chapter of Long Range?
In this case, in this book, it was. And again, that was after I kind of did the research, which involved, it's no spoiler to say it involves long range shooting, and
Right.
not necessarily military grade long range shooting, but the kind of weapons and optics that anybody with the money can buy now. And I got fascinated in this because so many people in my part of the country are into long range shooting, and have the guns, and in fact, there's a shooting range 10 minutes from my house where with a long range setup on it. And I'm not necessarily a long range shooter or even a great gun guy, but I got fascinated in the fact that it has become such a big deal. And along with it, that is kind of the ethics of hunting, in that, if you can hit an animal at 1,000 yards, is that really hunting and stalking? So I got interested in that, and then took a trip north in Wyoming to a company called Gunworks that manufacture these guns and the optics. And their whole deal, which fascinated me, is that they sight in the guns, they put on the scopes, you order it custom made, and their claim to fame is you can take it out of the box and hit something at 1,000 yards. And I did that. I was hitting target that I couldn't see with my naked eye, and I'm not that good a shot. So I thought that was fascinating. I knew it would cause some consternation among editors and others in New York, because they thought I was making this up. And I remember every man can be a sniper, and I said, "Yep, we have $11,000." So started with that, and when I realized how far those bullets can travel accurately and how many seconds it takes to reach, I came up with the idea of telling the first chapter from the point of view of the bullet, what it sees, passes over, and then as it closes in.
Yeah, that was cool.
Great.
I loved it.
Yeah, it is awesome. So as you mentioned, Long Range, you told us, is Joe Pickett's 20th novel. So first of all, congratulations. That's quite a milestone. So I'm sure that feels
Thank
good.
you.
That being said, when a series gets that far in, it's really, it can be easy to just become stale. You kind of just take the next, story and take the next story, but you're not developing much. So what have you been doing, and how have you kept it so fresh? Because you really have. So what's been your secret to that?
Well, I think it's three things, actually. One is I'm a reader too, and there's nothing worse than following a series that you love that starts to just keep telling the same story over and over. And there's not mentioning any names here, but there's a lot of series.
Oh, we won't tell anyone.
No, no one's gonna watch this.
No,
because I just, and the other thing is, because the books are told in real time. When Joe Pickett is first introduced in open season, that's 20 years ago. He was much younger. His daughter, Sheridan, 7 years old. The book's told partially from her point of view. And with each book, they've aged in real time, a year, sometimes less than that. Sometimes the books are back to back. But because the family is growing and aging, it does change the landscape, and I think keep it fresh.
Yeah.
Anybody who has kids know, everything changes from year to year based on them and their interests and the people they bring into the family and into the house. Yeah. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing is, as I'm writing, I'm easily bored. And if I'm writing and it feels like I'm just writing, just trying to fill 1,000 words, and because I can't, I'm not enjoying myself, I know that the reader will feel the same way. So I'll scrap that and go back and try to retool it so that at least it's interesting for me too.
Don't write the boring stuff.
Yeah, cut the boring stuff.
So you mentioned his family. So as a married guy who considers my wife, Mary Elizabeth, by the way, not only my best friend and partner, but something of a consigliere, I guess. Joe's relationship with Mary Beth resonates a lot with me. It also helps to define Joe's character. Tell me why that aspect was important, and in general, what do you think are Joe's most important character traits?
Well, I think I think it's important to note that, we're talking about the 20th book, but when I wrote the first one, I wasn't thinking about a series. I was thinking about a standalone about the Endangered Species Act and how it's based on some real things that happened here in Wyoming when I was a reporter, when a species thought extinct was found. And the amazing thing about it was that everybody in that area knew about that animal for years, and not one person had ever made the call and said, "We've got it," because they knew what kind of reaction there would be from federal agencies, from biologists, how much impact it would make. And I thought that was a great kind of New West story. So when I started writing it, the protagonist originally was going to be a sheriff, which I scrapped, and then a newspaper reporter, which I was, and because I wanted my guy to be able to take action. And I was doing ride-alongs in real life with the local game warden in my little town, and I realized that's the perfect protagonist for this story. And the game wardens in Wyoming are somewhat as described as in the books. They have huge districts up to 5,000 square miles. They're really heavily armed.
Crazy.
They rarely have backup when they get in trouble because they're out in the middle of nowhere. Almost everyone they encounter is armed, even unlike a cop or inner city cop or something. So they have to deal with things differently. And in their real lives, they're married, most of them, and have kids, and they live in state-owned homes. So that was all kind of part of the package. Plus, I wanted to write a protagonist who, at least in my mind, was realistic, didn't make a lot of money, worked for the state, knows his wife is smarter than he is, kind of feels bad because he stuck her in a crappy little house in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. So the wife and the kids are part of the real life game warden's job, and I tried to incorporate that into the books.
Yeah, it comes really pretty cool. Is Casey Dole's series, is that being adapted now for television? Is that David
Casey
Kelly?
Dole, yes.
Okay.
Yes. David E. Kelly, who has done, I think, 14 or 15 different shows.
Yeah.
One of them's an Emmy Award. He's very well known. Married to Michelle Pfeiffer. He bought the rights to the book The Highway about 4 years ago.
Right.
And then with each subsequent book in that, I call them standalones, but they're a series. He bought each one as it came out and was looking for a place for it and wrote a pilot that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And just in the last, 2 weeks, it was announced that ABC bought it, what they call a straight to series order.
Which is rare.
That's
it's
rare.
Extremely rare.
Yeah. And so it's going to be this fall on ABC.
Wow. Congratulations, man.
Every day I'm watching the Twitter and seeing what new actors have been hired. And they say they're going to start filming in March in Montana, which kind of makes me laugh because I don't know if any of them been in Montana in March.
Have fun with that.
And I'm happy about it because I know he sticks to source material. He likes working with writers. Some of the best stuff he's done recently has been adapted from crime and mystery books and working closely with the authors. And, so I'm excited. It's
fantastic.
Kind of
That's
high
a fast
profile.
turnaround, right? I mean,
unbelievably fast.
Well, what was your experience? I mean, publishing and Hollywood they're different animals. So what's been your experience overall and the comparisons between the two worlds?
Oh, I've had a lot of experience ever since the first book, which was optioned for a movie by Bruce Willis that was never made.
Wow.
My experience has been years and years of checks from Hollywood people and nothing ever being made, which I kind of thought is not the worst thing in the world.
That's true.
It's a winner, right?
Every book has been under option one kind or another since the beginning.
Wow.
Just, they don't develop anything. Now, all of a sudden, within, a couple of weeks, the David E. Kelly ABC thing came on, and in development is a Joe Pickett series with Paramount and Charter Spectrum. So they're going to actually offer it to Charter Spectrum's 80 million subscribers, and then it would go probably to another streaming service after that. I met with the writer on that just last week. I was in LA.
Wow.
And boom, boom, boom. Who knows?
Yeah. You think Yellowstone had a little something to do with it? People trying to
It
compete.
might, in that they were telling the Joe Pickett writers were all telling me that Yellowstone was the highest rated news series on cable last year. So
Yeah.
obviously that caused some, attention.
Not bad.
I think there's an appetite for original content
Yeah.
right now.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And there's sure a lot of outlets for it. That's a good thing for everybody.
Yeah,
No
The other
kidding.
thing, yeah.
there's a real lot. So whether it's your Cassie Duell or your Joe Pickett series of novels, setting is a really important piece, and it's really a character in and of itself. So how important is it for you? You live in, I always call where you are, I call that God's country. I always have. I lived out in Colorado a little bit, and I loved the Rockies and the mountains out there. But how important is it to you to kind of show the landscape and show kind of the majesty, really, of where you're fortunate enough to reside?
I think it's extremely important. That's, I remember the very first book. I thought, I had no idea if it would ever find a publisher. I thought if it did, it would be a small press somewhere. And I thought if it ever gets published, the one thing I want is that people I know who live here to say it rings of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to present the Rocky Mountain West and Wyoming, warts and all, as authentic, and not make it too much of a. I really despise the writers who do a Western kind of setting, and everybody is a Western caricature or rube, or kind of tends to speak with a Southern accent, which we do not have. And so I try to keep it authentic to the people and the characters, and constantly hearing from readers in the area that they know that person I wrote about, whether they did or not.
Mhm.
That's really. But plus, I love to read myself. I love to read books with a real great sense of place. Even if I really don't ever want to. Sometimes I feel like I know the areas better than the people who live there when you've got a good guide.
Right.
And like in our genre, when Michael Connelly writes about LA, or John Sanford writes about Minnesota, I love that stuff because that they're talking from the inside out, and it's almost a travelogue as well as a sociology lesson on the area. And
Right.
I try to do that with Wyoming and the Rockies and small towns.
Yep. That's
Well
what it
done.
feels.
I always think that some of the stories that I write are in New Jersey that people wouldn't want to go. New Jersey.
What's New Jersey?
Well, but that's the thing. If I think if the setting is authentic and you bring something to it
Right.
and open it up, it's fascinating whether you want to go there or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't write these books because I want a lot of people to come to Wyoming, although some people do. I just, if someone, if they're read, they maybe have a better understanding than what they thought.
Yeah. Just
You
get
mentioned Connolly. I think reading Michael Connolly and Robert Crace the first time I went to LA, I felt like I'd been there many times because they infuse their books with that setting so much.
James Lee Burke does it with Louisiana.
Yeah.
Tries to do it with Montana, not as successfully, but I mean, I read James Lee Burke and I find myself sweating. It's because we're in the swamp with Louisiana, and the clouds are rolling in. And it's great, just evocative.
Yep.
well, speaking of readers, I know your readers want more. They want more Joe, more Mary Beth, more Nate, even more Missy, and the corrupt authorities that they confront. And after 20 Joe Pickett books, you think it'd be the same old story, but it's not. Long Range catches up with all the key characters at new stages of their lives. But did you have any difficulties moving on to those new stages for Long Range?
Not really. I don't ever look ahead. When I finish a book, then I try to figure out what the next one is going to be. I never am writing a book going, "Oh, I'm setting this up for 2 books down the road or the next one even." When I get done with a book, what I always do is assemble 3 to 4 ideas, things I want to cover at some point, run those by my editor, and then we both mutually decide on which one's next. And then I kind of, go back to my outline and update my characters. What were they doing in the last one? How old were they? Where were they located? What was their job? And then project a year into the future, and how does that change or not? So once I get that all kind of that base laid, then it goes pretty easily.
So you're not purposely dropping nuggets
No, no, because you know what I think is, maybe it's just me being lazy, but I think that as a writer, if you're holding things back in any book to be used later,
Hmm.
that a reader can sense that you're holding things back. And I don't think that's fair to the reader. I think you
Hmm.
put everything you can into every book and then try to figure out the next one. I've met fledgling writers sometimes who say, I've got the first 10 books figured out. This is going to start here and it's going to end up here. And I just think, write the first one and put everything into that and then worry about the second
Yeah.
one, and much less the 10th.
Gosh.
That's called a little bit forward thinking, huh? So the Western is a uniquely American genre. It's got its own archetypes and conventions, and it's generally violence and epic scope. And while they're not as prevalent as they once were, they're still very much locked into the American DNA. And your novels are modern, but they also share some of the characteristics and hallmarks of a classic Western. What is it about the American West that still has this hold on us? And do you consider your novels modern Westerns?
I do. I consider them contemporary westerns,
Yeah.
and always have. The standalones as well, because primarily because of the place they, where they take place. I'm never. You're safe. I'm never going to write a New Jersey novel ever. I don't know enough about it, but
No
I do
mobs,
know this area, and I've grown up here, and I know that. There is a certain. Some of it's kind of phony at times, but there is a certain. Culture and personality to the people who are here, and it all draws from the West. There's a lot of individualism, libertarian kind of views overall. There's not a single urban area in the state of Wyoming. It's
Right.
all rural, so it comes from there, and it can be overdone, and it can be too much of a caricature, but it always exists, and the history is so close. It's not very long ago when everything happened.
Yeah.
So it's still, people still talk as if it was just, they were here.
Well, let's stick with the American West theme for a second. Growing up in Wyoming, as a young man, who were your go-to authors? Who were the people that influenced you even before you started, writing professionally?
I remember one that really got me was A.B. Guthrie, set in Montana. The Big Sky, the Mountain Man era.
Yep.
That I read all of those books. And then kind of at the same time, Thomas McGuane, who was writing super contemporary hit novels set in the West. And I'm still a huge McGuane fan. And my favorite author is McGuane, but I know I was highly influenced by Joseph Heller in Catch-22, one of the few books I've read from it was first time I think reading that, probably as a 14 or 15-year-old, thinking, man, if I could just do this, I could, put these thoughts down and create this world. But I've always read everything I could that was set in this region, as well as, other books, of course. But, it would really bother me growing up how many books that were set in the Mountain West that I found inauthentic. That I knew were rendered by people who visited here or just moved to Jackson Hole and suddenly they were experts on everything, and or just kind of put on a hat and said, "I'm a good old boy."
Well, that's what $10 million will do for you.
You mentioned Catch-22. We had Captain Dale Dye on the show, and he talked about a lot of things. And when we asked him, I forget the question, but it was basically, if you were stuck on a desert island, what would you want? And the book Catch-22 was the first thing out of his mouth, which we all thought was really interesting. Before he said knife, gun, fire starter, he said novel Catch-22.
It caught us all off guard for sure.
I think he said he had an old copy on like the nightstand that he goes to all the time.
Yeah.
Which was
I just got a new copy, the 50th anniversary hard, and I can't believe it's 50 years old.
Wow, 50 years.
Time flies. So CJ, I'm sure you get peppered with questions or requests. I'm sorry, to write a separate Nate Romanowski series. Is that something you've ever entertained?
Not really. And the reason is because I think that character is really best in small, intense doses. I've written 2 books where he's more the lead and Joe Pickett is more on the side, and I think they work okay. And I've written a couple just pure Nate Romanowski short stories, but I think he's best when he, like I said, in small doses. And his characters change too. I don't want to have, kind of the standard, kick-ass sidekick who just comes in and kills everybody and saves the day.
Right.
Sometimes it works in reverse with Joe Pickett. And in the new novel, the way things have kind of evolved, Joe Pickett and Mary Beth are now empty nesters, having raised their girls, and Nate is married with a tiny baby.
Yeah.
So that the whole thing is reversed with he and Joe over the years, and I like that juxtaposition.
Do you get excited when you write from his point of view, though? As excited as any other character?
Yes, because he can do anything. He can, and he does do anything. He's ripped a lot of ears off. He's prided himself on now at one point being able to hit 3 guys with 1 bullet with his .454 Casual. It was 2. That was his record. So that kind of stuff is pretty fun to write, but that could also turn into a horrible caricature if I don't be careful.
I won't give any spoilers away, but one of the things I love about the new book is that you said he can do anything, but that child is like this. It's great to see him fighting in the constraints of fatherhood, and I think that's a really neat dramatic tension added to this story.
Thank you. Yeah, there's at one point where he's meeting with the guy who's telling him that the cartel is coming to get him, and all he's worried about is, can he get to the store to get Pampers in time?
No more.
You better get the right ones too.
Yeah, no more washables.
That's right.
So CJ, one of the common praises I hear about what you write is the relatability of the characters, whether it's Joe or Cassie or any of the other supporting characters. So why do you think that resonates so well with people, those characters you've created?
I think it's because they're both flawed and they make mistakes. I think and I think that does 2 things. I think by making them not necessarily super characters, crime fighters. One, I think like you say, it makes it more relatable to the person reading the book and to me as I'm writing it.
Sure.
But also I think it actually increases the tension when you know that the protagonist, that Joe or Cassie may screw up or may get tricked or may get beaten up because they can't see it coming. And so if you know that anything can happen at any time to anyone, then it just increases the level of tension throughout the book. Mm-hmm. Michael Connelly's famous for saying, the trick is tension on every page. And if you have somebody who might make a mistake, it's just inevitable.
Yeah. Well, I think you talk about like even the flaws, and you say that with, a lot of times, especially in the thriller genre or whatever, the main protagonist, is an expert shot. He might miss every now and then, but he can hit it. And you've talked about in other interviews and stuff that I've read where, Joe isn't the best shot. He's not the greatest marksman out there, but, and I think that does help him relate as an everyman. So.
Well, I think in his mind, he's never really going to ever have to draw his weapon again. So what's the point?
Okay.
It never works out that way. And he's not bad with a shotgun, but he's horrible with a pistol. I'll tell you a story a couple of years ago. Some research in Montana with the Lewis and Clark Sheriff's Department to do a ride along with them. And a bunch of those, the cops were real fans. And the first thing they did after I landed was take me out to the firing range. So that I could actually learn to shoot, and I had to explain to him, I can shoot, you guys. It's Joe Pickett who can't shoot. And with some of your backgrounds, I know it's probably frustrating to you too, that, if he's got to use his sidearm, it's pretty, unless it's from like 3 inches away, he's not going to hit what he wants.
That's funny.
My background is that I'm a complete amateur, and that's why I'm writing about a character. My whole book is called Amateur Hour. So
it's about this show.
Yeah, it's about this show. Now, you mentioned earlier that the Pickett novels are written in real time. And so Joe's family's grown as your own family's grown. And now, will that continue, or will you ever foresee freezing Joe in time so you can kind of keep him in the kind of action that he's the young man's game, I suppose?
No, I don't have. I really don't want to do that. I think, in fact, a couple of years ago, I had to. I was starting the novel, and I realized, oh my God, I don't know how old Joe Pickett is. And I went back to the very first book. I found one mention that he was 34, and then I did a timeline of all the books. They took place a year after, 6 months back to back. Came up with the determination that he was 49 at the time I was writing the book. So now I'm real cognizant of the age, but I think when he reaches retirement age, I will be ready to retire myself. So and you've got to suspend disbelief, as you know, so much with the long running series, that I don't like the idea of suspending him in time. Gotcha. I know there's some popular series that have done that. I can't read them. I can't see, 70-year-old guy getting shot in one book and then just bouncing around in the next with no reference to getting shot in the previous book and that kind of thing. That's too much for me, and I don't want to write this kind.
I can't bounce back in the mid-50s, so forget 70. Hey, let's go back a little bit in time here. So you graduated from DU, University of Denver,
right?
With mass communications major. What was life like for you before Open Season debuted in 2001? Because I venture to say that there was a little bit of time in between graduating college and that first book.
There was a lot of time.
I was trying to be nice.
It was 20 years. I was a newspaper reporter on a small weekly newspaper where I still draw from those experiences for the books. That's a great training ground, I think. And then got married, moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming, worked for AAA for a while, worked on some ranches. This is one of those things where it sounds like I couldn't keep a job, but it just is. I started a company doing international tourism marketing on behalf of 5 states in the West to Europe and Scandinavia and Asia, and did that for 24 years. Wow. Even after the first books came out. And finally got to the point where the book income was outweighing the company income, and I was able to sell the company and move on. But part of the tourism work was also sort of a training ground for what I write about now, because I was able to, part of my job was to host tour operators and journalists from overseas, excuse me, all over the Mountain West. So I took them on pack trips, we went on ski trips, we did all sorts of wilderness things, whitewater trips. Wow. And I was able to do all these things now that I write about in real life. Like I said, almost not with the thought in mind that I'd use them in books, but just to gain that experience. And now I feel pretty comfortable writing about that stuff.
Yeah. Well, that extra experience, I mean, it kind of molds you into a much broader person than one specific career path, probably. So,
well, I think it's better than an MBA program, creative writing.
Yeah.
We spoke about Yellowstone earlier, and Taylor Sheridan, who creates that, so he plows some of the same ground you do, with its Wind River.
Yeah, what do you know about that? Yeah. It's almost as if he'd read the books, isn't it?
Yeah, it seemed that way a little bit. But in all seriousness, do you think that we are experiencing a bit of a modern American Western Renaissance? I mean, it seems like every time I turn the corner, there's something in that genre.
Well, I hope so. I think so. I think part of it, it's 2 things. One is I think the interest in the West and Western stories and Westerns are cyclical. They come back around every, 20 or 30 years. But the other thing is I mentioned earlier, there's just so many outlets now, so many movies, so many streaming channels, so many regular channels that it's just broadening the whole base. And that includes Westerns and things set in specific locations. I think I like the trend of on TV series, just like I like the trend in books of them being set in unique locations that are off the beaten path or not necessarily urban. I think that's good all the way around.
Yeah, definitely my favorite. Well, all right, CJ, you survived the main portion of the interview. We're now
Good.
entering.
Thank
We're
you.
now entering what's called the lightning round.
Good luck.
So,
okay.
here I will ask
Good
a
luck.
series of questions from each of your co-hosts here, and we put very little thought into the questions, and we require very little thought in your responses.
Okay.
And we will challenge you like never before in any other interview you've ever had.
Do it.
Okay.
He's not lying.
And as the host, I will go first here. So, my first question is this: you can only own and use one trout fly. What do you choose?
I think I would choose a streamer, if called the Thin Mint.
The Thin Mint.
It's kind of unique to this area, but it's whenever I'm trying a hole out, whenever I'm on the river, that's my go-to.
I gotta
it
get
works
one of these
the
things. Is it locally produced?
It is, but they're all over. Every year outfitters all say this is the magic fly. We just love it. But it's been around here for at least 10 years now. But it's just a killer.
Big brownies, I'm sure.
Yep,
All right.
everything.
All right. Question number 2. You can only choose one: the Gray Reef section or Fremont Canyon.
Gray Reef if it's for fish. If you want to catch big fish, Fremont Canyon for the scenery. So I sort of answered both ways.
Well, but it's true. And the monsters are coming out of Fremont are they're like giant salmon sometimes. All right. Question number 3.
I like the fishing question.
All right. Well, that's good because here's my final one. Explain to everyone what a trout fishing grand slam is.
For trout, there's 4 different kinds of trout in the Rocky Mountains, or at least in Wyoming. The Yellowstone cutthroat, the Snake River cutthroat, rainbows, a brown, and there's one other one I'm not thinking of.
Well, so I caught one last summer, and they explained it to me. My guy explained it to me was brown, a cut, and a rainbow, all in the same day.
Actually, I think you need to add a couple fish to that.
You do, but he was trying to make me feel good. This was pre-tip.
Yeah, I was going to say he wanted a nice tip.
You got the grand slam. Congratulations.
It was a she, if I recall.
It probably was on that particular stretch of.
That was in the Gray Reef.
There's 5 of them that if you take photos of them, you get a little plaque.
I didn't get a plaque.
No.
All right,
kiss on the cheek.
He is. He's survived my lightning round, and we are moving on to the next co-host.
All right,
here.
So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So Nate, he carries that 454 Casull, the revolver made by Freedom Arms. What makes that weapon so special? And have you personally shot it?
At the time, it was the 3rd book, so it would have been 2004. I wanted to introduce this Nate Romanowski character, and I did some research, and the most powerful handgun, because he's a bigger than life character. And at the time I did the research, most of it came back with a 454 Casull 5-shot revolver. When I found out it was made by Freedom Arms in Wyoming, it's like all the stars aligned, and I realized perfect. So I went to Freedom Arms, met with the president, fired the revolver. He's a tremendous shot. I'm not that good of a shot, but it was kind of unbelievable. And within they don't have this anymore because it's too cruel, but they used to have a loop of a video in their lobby when you walked in of people firing that handgun where it would kick back and hit them in the head and they'd fall over. I thought that was hilarious. But they also had a big metal plate in the front with a little dent from a 357, a little bit of a hole from I think a 44 caliber Magnum, and then a great big hole from the 454 where it went straight through.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen the rounds. So like this is a 357 Sig round.
Yep.
And this stops men. This is a man stopper. That thing, that 454,
it kills cars.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
It'll take out an engine block.
Scary looking round.
Let me show you.
Yep, he's going to pull a round off right here. So this is a 300 blackout out of a rifle round here.
Right, rifle
And he's
round,
going to
yeah.
show us this one.
This is a pistol. Look at that thing.
Lord.
That's a 454.
That's crazy.
This is a 30 caliber round, and he's holding that thing up. Look at that.
And so when you pull the trigger on that revolver, oh my gosh, that thing has got such a kick on it that it could fly out of your hand if you're not ready for it.
Careful.
Right, and you really have to brace for it.
All right, so moving past the weapons, if Joe Pickett was actually suddenly transported to New York City Times Square, what would be the first words out of his mouth?
Who's that naked cowboy guy?
I was told to put my clothes back on, by the way. So
Yeah.
You kind of do look like him.
You kind of do.
So somebody told me that once. I'm like,
it's New York City. So.
Yeah.
And so CJ, is it true that cowboys don't cry?
No. Most of the real ones I know are really they're really quite sensitive in their way, and it's like if you've ever been with a guide or an outfitter where they're all very taciturn and grumpy, and boy, you get them talking, it's like, oh, I wish they'd shut up. After a while.
every one of the ones I've been.
I mean, they really do want to talk, and they not all of them are the same, of course, but when you spend a lot of time off by yourself, when you finally get somebody who will listen, you tend to talk. And I've spent a lot of time with them, and the difference between rodeo cowboys and real working ranch cowboys. But the one thing I'd say that in common is that they really like to talk.
Mm.
That's so true.
Well, just following up with that, what's with the whole crying thing? What's the dumbest thing you've ever cried about?
Oh, dumbest thing.
Yeah, it's got to be the dumbest.
Geez, I can't think of one. All I can think of is when my dog died.
That's totally legit.
No, that's. I'll let you know the dumbest thing I ever cried about. Since maybe this might help you. There was a commercial. My wife looked at me like I was from Mars. It was a commercial, and it was like Elsa. Someone dressed up in Elsa on a horse, doing just a lap or something, and she was singing, and all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, I started crying, and my wife looked at me, she's like, what the hell is wrong with you? I'm like, I have no idea. Somehow that commercial hit me. It was the dumbest thing ever.
It touched him.
Wow. I have to say, I agree with your wife.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Chris, we can edit that out later. You might want us to edit that out later, Chris.
No, there's no editing that.
No,
nope.
I'm gonna have a
That's
drink.
our promo right there.
No, I own that.
Okay, CJ, I think I'm up. So I think it's probably fair to say you're an outdoorsman. So you probably spent a little bit of time out in the wilderness. What is the grossest thing you ever ate when you were out in the wilderness?
Oh, I did take a bite out of a liver from an elk once, right after we killed it, because I'd read where mountain men used to do that, and my buddy and mine we were hunting with kind of dared each other to try it, and I actually do like liver, but I like it cooked. I found out, and I didn't like that very much. A similar kind of experience was the first time I like to fish for big game fish with fly rods, and the first time I ever a tuna.
Nice.
It was in the Sea of Cortez, so it was really hot, and the water was warm, and the captain instantly made sashimi out of it, and handed me a big chunk about the size of your fist, and it wasn't very good that way. So that took that down.
I think
the liver would have been better with some fava beans and Chianti.
Yeah, I agree.
So Joe Pickett gets stuck in a time warp. He's out on horseback, crests a hill, and comes face to face with the Duke himself. What does he say to John Wayne?
Oh, geez. Can I see your fishing license?
That's the perfect
I love
answer.
That's awesome.
And conservation stamp. You have to have that too.
Oh yeah, better have a trout stamp too.
So my last question: you live out in a place where there's quite a few rodeos. Could you last 8 seconds on a bull?
No, I've never been on a live bull. I've been on a mechanical bull, and I couldn't. There's no way. I don't have the sense of balance. To do it. I've tried it, and I've been around a lot of rodeo and a lot of rodeo riders. I don't know how they just get into a certain kind of rhythm with that animal where I think you can't describe or replicate, but when you see it, they know what they're doing. Yeah. You can't fight it. It's just got to be a way of kind of like being part of the bull in order to last that long. I could never do it.
Yeah,
you're gonna go where that bull goes.
Oh yeah, it's like riding a wave. Yeah,
I got thrown off a mechanical bull in New Orleans.
Twist or turn or stop. It's tough.
Yeah,
it didn't go well for me either.
That describes a lot of things.
That's gonna be on my tombstone. That's my epitaph. Didn't go well for me. So my first question: Joe Pickett is somewhat famous. We've kind of talked about this, and you might have answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. Joe Pickett is somewhat famous for not being a great shot. Could CJ Box outshoot him?
Yes.
Oh.
Yep. I am not a super marksman, but no, I know that. We have a little ranch, so I have a little shooting range of my own, so I get to practice a lot, and I'm not the best, but I'm not bad.
All
right.
We need to connect him with Stephen Hunter.
Yeah,
Stephen Hunter need to shoot.
Shooting.
I read his stuff. I'm a fan. He really knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Question number 2: the best movie in the modern Western genre, similar to your book. I mean, not the movie, not similar to your book, but the same genre.
I tend to think the movie that affected me the most growing up was one called Rancho Deluxe, which was written by a screenplay by Tom McGuane, set in Montana at the time, about modern day cattle rustlers. And almost everybody I suggest that movie to hates it, but I still watch it and think it's just great.
All right.
They just had poor taste.
Okay, now you have to take your wife out to a picnic, and it's a really, really special occasion. It's like the most special occasion. And you have the whole Mountain West to deal with. What is the single most beautiful spot you've ever seen in the Mountain West?
There's a bunch of them. Lake Marie in southern Wyoming, which is not far from where I live, which is kind of take your breath away, gorgeous, because it's below a huge mountain rock face. It's gorgeous. And then I can think of about 5 different places along the river where we float that I would put in that same category.
All right.
Oh, nice.
Or Yellowstone Park, which I love.
Yellowstone Park, right there in the main meadow there.
Yep, Hayden Valley, probably.
Yeah.
There's an overlook near Crested Butte, Colorado it was like just one of those places where we were there, and I looked out and I thought, I don't know what could be more perfect than
just bury me here. Yeah.
Exit 135 on the Garden State Parkway.
The Jersey Shore. The Jersey Shore.
Just gotta step over the garbage when you're going there. Yeah.
No. Emerald Lake and Rocky Mountain National Park. Mike, you've probably been there and hiked there before. Just the backdrop and the green lake, and it's just, and then in the winter it's totally frozen and it's totally different look. But
yeah, it has a Montana feel to it. Yeah.
Well, you survived the lightning round.
What? He survived the lightning round?
That was the last one.
That was the last question.
Pretty harmless.
We were kind of easy on this guy. I don't
No,
know. Well, hey,
Except for
CJ.
the crying question, they were all good.
He's just really sensitive this week. That's all. Well, you survived our interview today. We really appreciate you coming on here. Talked about Long Range. Please,
Long Range, folks. Fantastic book.
I love
buy it.
I love this. This was fantastic. And go out, pre-order now. Should be coming out shortly, right after this interview. Next day, it'll be out. And congrats, 20, huh? That's a big number. So
yeah, it is. I'm all day long today. I've been working on number 21.
Nice. That's the way you do it.
Fans will be excited to hear that one.
Yes, they will. Well, thanks again for coming on. We're looking forward to the TV adaptations coming up in your next book. And anytime you need help from us promoting anything else, please come on and folks, get out there and buy this book.
Love to. I love the format. This is fun.
Beautiful. All right, toast to you, gentlemen.
I'll have my glass of bourbon next time. Though.
Yeah.
All right.
Pretend it's vodka,
Cheers.
Cheers. All right. The crew would like to thank Mr. C.J. Box for coming onto our program today. It was truly an honor to talk to the man whose 20th novel in the C.J. Box series, Joe Pickett and Long Range. It's coming out next week, and as my good friend says, go out and buy it. Watch our show every Monday when we bring on a new best-selling author, and catch us on social media when we make our announcements on a weekly basis. With that, I'd like to bring my boys on for no, we are going to toast to that one because it wasn't bad. There.
It wasn't awful. Cheers.
It wasn't bad.
awful.
But novel.
Well done. Well done.
Here's to you and your eyeball.
Please hang up and try again.
We would like to thank CJ Box for coming on to our show today. We talked about Long Range, his next Joe Pickett novel. So as my good friend says,
What's a novel? I never read a novel before.
It's a book and novel.
You said novel.
If you fools don't know the difference between the two of them, I'm going to have to get some replacements for this show. Check out what we have to say on a daily basis. I'm not going to say Twitter, but I am going to see the jazz hands, and now I got to do it all over again.
Sorry. Why are you looking at me?
I'm looking for help, which is the stupidest damn thing that a man could do.
I know. I need to start.
The last thing I can help from you guys is help.
We start holding up cue cards.
Don't say Twitter. The novel.
We've got Twitter with a circle and a line through it.
Watch our show on Mondays and then read the novel.
Read my novel.
I'm watching on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Just keep watching.
Yeah. Don't go to lunch. Lose some weight. Watch our
different IP address each time, please.
Perfect.
Different IP address. Yeah.
My good friend says, go out and buy it. Please like our shows on whatever.
It's impossible. Once it gets bad,
once it gets in the head.
I'm telling you.
Watch our show. Don't say watch our show because obviously they're watching it.
Join us next Monday and every effing Monday when we talk.
Monday. Just quit your job. Just go to a 4-day work week. Take Mondays off. Trust us.
I like that.
Long Range is out next week. My good friend says, go out and buy it. And every Monday, check out the crew reviews for our latest interviews with best-selling authors. Please go on to our shows, like, retweet, click the up thumb button. God, I was so good there for about 10
just
seconds.
There.
Just go with, see you next Monday, boys. Cheers.
I have to put a tape over my computer screen because I look up and it's just shit for brains the minute I see you guys' faces.
I love it because I've been there.
And you're like, I had it. I really had it.
Yeah, that was a good one, too.
That was
It was good.
I know.
See you next Monday,
up,
folks.
I got to look at my face because I look up at you guys and it just turns into jello up in the cranial box there. Damn you.
No, that's good. You're good. Leave it.
I like that.
Leave it. Leave it.
Yeah, well,
I like the defiance. No, we are going to toast it out.
We are going to toast it. You bastards.
Because that's as good as it's going to get.
Doing
it's not getting better than this.
I suck.
You know I have full editing power.
Hold on. Let me get the hamster.